I don't want to get into the deliberative process. We're one team and it's one effort, but this is not a revolutionary concept that there are disparate views when one has many people involved in the decision-making process.
Look, under the Trump administration, we did DNA testing, and in one pilot, I think it was El Paso, we found almost 1/3 of the families weren't even families. These children were victims of trafficking. And look,
I wish that we would have had different leadership and a different governor in California, or we might have a different result there.
Trump's DHS nominee, Kristi Noem, now in front of the Senate, taking questions and giving us a very nice job review of Alejandro Mayorkas, the current Homeland Security Secretary, who's opened the borders wide open to allow criminals and terrorists to enter our country. She's explaining that in addition to those two categories, there are also murderers, R's, and many other bad people who are being brought in on apps. Here's Kristi.
First of all, thank you, Governor, for being here, for testifying before this committee, and for your service, not just to your state, but to America. 9 years ago today, we met in probably the coldest day I've ever been in my life in Iowa, as you and I were making phone calls and whipping up votes for Republicans in Iowa. My wife, Bridget, who's here, got a chance to meet you, and we left Iowa saying, that person's really going to go far. And here we are 9 years later. You've been an amazing governor, amazing congresswoman, and now you're going to make an even better Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. So I think sometimes in D.C. we tend to complicate things. There is a current Secretary of Homeland Security. So why don't we take this opportunity to do a little job review and compare and contrast him to you. So just if you don't mind, I'll ask you some questions and you can give me an answer. Secretary Mayorkas allowed about, you said it, just about 400 people on a terror watch list to come into this country illegally. If you were confirmed as Secretary of Homeland Security, how many people on the terror watch list would you allow into this country?
Well, Senator, we would work every single day until we had that number was zero. And if you look at the previous Trump administration over his entire 4 years, in comparison to Joe Biden's number, President Trump, it was 11 that were then removed from the country and faced consequences. When you look at the 382 that Joe Biden has let in and the policies continue, is shocking and needs to be changed immediately.
Mayorkas let in about 12,000 murderers. How many would you target to let into this country?
My goal every day would be to have no murderers allowed into this country in our communities.
Mayorkas allowed 16,000 rapists. How many would you target to let in?
Every day I'd work to make sure that there was none let into this country.
He let Mayorkas 600,000 people with criminal convictions. How many would you allow in?
We would work every day to make sure people are safe and that those with criminal convictions are immediately removed.
How many private jets would you have the United States taxpayers have fly into foreign countries to pick up people to bring them here?
Yeah, Senator, we will no longer be undertaking that mission at the Department of Homeland Security.
So not 700,000 individuals on private jets over the last 4 years. You would not have any.
No, I'll be working with President Trump to put in place his agenda in adherence to our federal laws.
And how many illegals will you plan to house in luxury hotel rooms in Manhattan at a cost of $6,000 per month?
Sir, clearly, Senator, during this election, the American people said they did not support that and that that would not be a part of this new administration.
How about sex change operations for illegals? How many of those would you suspect you would fund?
Senator, I believe that the Department of Homeland Security will be reevaluating its mission in this country to not allow that going forward under President Trump's goals.
And if you had an illegal migrant that was in this country and they committed a crime, would you offer them airfare from one state to another to evade law enforcement?
Sir, I will be following this nation's laws and the Constitution and make sure that all laws are adhered to.
And if you had been the head of the Department of Homeland Security a year or so ago, would you have closed a detention center in Georgia that would have allowed the release of somebody charged with a crime?
Sir, I don't have the specifics to that situation, but certainly that would not be something that I would want to have under my watch.
So just to be clear, Lakem Riley would be alive today if you had been the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Oh, Senator, my hope is that that would be true, yes.
Let's switch to another part of the disgraceful immigration laws that Biden and Mayorkas, who objectively, by the way, objectively has been the worst cabinet member ever in the history of the United States of America.
Bad, yeah.
Let's talk about temporary protective status. Temporary being the operative word. Mayorkas and Biden just extended temporary protective status again through 2027. Will you continue to corrupt TPS to allow some sort of open borders agenda? And will you use hot weather of 80 degrees and sunny beaches in El Salvador as a reason why people have to stay in America and not safely return?
Yes, Senator, this program has been abused and manipulated by the Biden administration, and that will no longer allow that and these extensions going forward the way that they are. The program was intended to be temporary, and this extension of over 600,000 Venezuelans as well is alarming when you look at what we've seen in different states, including Colorado, with gangs doing damage and harming the individuals and the people that live there.
In terms of our border, like the physical border, I've been there many times, you've been there many times. Who should have operational control of our border? The United States government or the Mexican drug cartels?
Oh, Senator, the United States needs to control our borders and secure them.
So if this were a job interview in the private sector and you had somebody like Alejandro Mayorkas in charge and we had the opportunity to upgrade to you, this would be the greatest upgrade in history of the United States of America. But I'm going to end my time with a startling statistic and actually a challenge to the Democrat Party. When Mayorkas was confirmed, every single Democrat voted to confirm him, and 6 Republicans joined all 50 Democrats in that confirmation. If we get to the vote, and hopefully, Chairman, we could do that Monday, because we cannot wait one single day without you being in charge of that department. We should have 100%, 100 senators vote for your confirmation. This will be the litmus test, in my mind, as to whether we have a Democrat Party that's actually serious about doing bipartisan things like securing this country and protecting our citizens. Any Democrat that voted for Mayorkas that does not vote for you should be in front of their voters and removed from office. Thank you for serving, Brian. Thank you for being here, for putting up with the nonsense that you guys have had to put up with over the years. You are going to make an amazing Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you for being here.
All right, and I do hope that she is confirmed very, very quickly. They take a full vote on her because we want Trump to have his people in place from day one. Colin Rugg clipped this one for us. You can see Alejandro Mayorkas is now out trying to repair his reputation. And you can see he's telling us that now he's trying to throw Biden's inner circle under the bus, saying, oh, I was just following orders. I was just doing whatever the president directed me to do. Yeah, right. Joe Biden didn't know anything. These people were all being controlled by other forces, and now they're realizing they were not able to commandeer the country away from the American people, so they're trying to repair their images. Here's Alejandro.
Secretary, put the politics of the election aside if you want. Do you not look at the immigration issue in this country and what has transpired over the last 4 years, given the number of people coming into this country illegally, given the firestorm that this has created, the national dialogue about it, given some of the efforts, frankly, by the administration, especially early on, to be more lenient than they had been? Do you think none of those things, if you could go back, you would do differently?
Look, yes, and you have to understand something, and this is not specific to government, but to any large organization, including a government administration. People have different views on what the correct policies should be, what the correct operational measures should be. Those disagreements, those different views are voiced, decisions are made, and then everyone marches in unity together. That is the nature of a large organization, and the government is no different.
But just so I'm clear, that are you suggesting your own personal views about how to operate this were at odds, or there was a distinction between your personal approach and how you would have wanted to do it and how maybe your bosses wanted to do it?
I don't want to get into the deliberative process. We're one team and it's one effort, but this is not a revolutionary concept that there are disparate views when one has many people involved in the decision-making process.
That guy is really something else. So, well, I can't tell you about what my bosses told me to do, but I just followed orders like a good little Nazi who just lets in a bunch of foreigners into our country and then tries to run away like he had no responsibility in it at all. So that's Mayorkas. We also have another fun one from Tom Homan, incoming border czar, who is explaining to us that those 340,000 missing kids are a big problem, and he's going to get to the bottom of it.
I haven't decided we're going to do it or not, but I said it's something that may be on the table. And why? Because exactly what you just said. Look, under the Trump administration, we did DNA testing, and in one pilot, I think it was El Paso, we found almost 1/3 of the families weren't even families. These children were victims of trafficking.
Sick.
And look, this administration lost over 340,000 children that were smuggled in this country, released to unvetted sponsors, now they can't find. We know for a fact some of these families aren't families. We've proven that. So family residential centers are built for families. They're not jails. They're not hardware, concertina ware. They're built for families. And one of the reasons we were considering doing that is so we can do DNA testing, so we can do a deep dive investigation, make sure that family's a family and that child is not a victim of trafficking. This is about saving children.
Yeah, that makes sense. 300,000 missing children at least right now under Joe and Kamala.
Much more than that. And the kids that aren't missing, if a third of them are going into their families, it is a full-blown operation at the southern border. And then you'll hear even some Republicans coming out and be like, what is it with these conspiracy theorists talking about human trafficking and oligarchical pedophiles and all the things? Well, it's stuff like this. Who's running these these rings? Who's running these operations? And why is our federal government allowing it to happen? All good questions we hope we get answers to. So we also got one more clip of Noem and our good senator called Ron Johnson in the House. Here's this exchange.
Governor Noem, welcome, and thank you for your willingness to serve. You'll be taking over a massive federal government agency, 240,000 employees. It's probably too massive.
Way too big.
Had I been there back then, I don't think I would have assembled these 22 different agencies in this massive department, but that's what we've got. It's a department that the previous administration, I think, has completely misused. Instead of using Customs and Border Protection to do that, to protect our border and secure it, they've utilized those resources to incentivize a massive influx of illegal immigration. Instead of using the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency to do that, they instead engage in mission creep and utilize to censor Americans with the Misinformation Board. I am concerned about disaster relief, just federal disaster relief in general, creating greater and greater and increasing levels of moral hazard, resulting in higher costs of these disasters. So let's cover each one of those kind of in order. How do you gain control over a massive agency whose resources and personnel have been misused? I mean, how do you root out those individuals who, instead of securing our border, opened it up and facilitated this?
Well, Senator, this has been a big topic of conversation in most of the meetings that I've had with the members of this committee. How do we fix this agency, which the reputation is that it's broken and dysfunctional? I think that was the question I get asked the most, is why would you want to head up such a dysfunctional department? And I would say that because the mission of the department is to secure the homeland and our people. It's our biggest vulnerability right now. And we have a president that's not enforcing the law. And I don't believe the law should be unequally applied. Everyone should be subject to our laws, and a nation without laws and without borders is not a nation at all. So I will work by ensuring one of the things that Senator Ernst talked about, people have to show up for work. I think there's going to be a majority of people who don't have their primary mission to secure the homeland, that if they don't want to show up for work, then maybe they're just not truly passionate about protecting America. I think they need to do that, and they need to recognize what their job is. The morale in DHS is very low. I'm going to let people do their jobs. I'm going to remind them what their jobs are. Some of these Border Patrol agents haven't been able to do their jobs for a very long time. They've been processing paperwork and facilitating an invasion when they should be back securing our border, which is why they were recruited and wanted to serve there to begin with. We're going to build partnerships with local law enforcement, with ICE and task forces. So we're communicating again with local sheriffs and mayors and law enforcement to partner together. When you talk about the fact that this is such a broken agency that needs so much improvement, a lot of it goes back to why were we created and are we fulfilling that mission and making sure that these individuals are getting back on task.
So under my chairmanship and under the Trump administration, we did rename a part of DHS the Cybersecurity Information Security Agency. I in no way, shape, or form ever contemplated that the sub-agency within DHS that was really focused on securing us against the cyber threats and other threats to our infrastructure would ever be used to violate the Constitution the way it was used to violate the Constitution under the Biden administration. This administration has been completely opaque. We do not have the information to know and the communication in terms of what all happened here. So my question relates to how they misused CISA. Will you commit to providing the transparency, providing the information, investigate it yourself, but provide this committee, my subcommittee, the information to expose the truth to the American public, but even more importantly, propose a piece of legislation based on our investigation, based on those results, to fix it so that no administration can ever misuse the language of the law to commit that kind of unconstitutional act and violate people's First Amendment rights.
Yeah, Senator, I look forward to working with you on that. And I think that what we saw during the COVID pandemic, the actions of CISA, their misinformation and disinformation campaign, the materials they were putting out was shocking. Shocking at what they were doing to decide what was truth, what wasn't, and how they were trying to manipulate the American people. We saw it in elections and Russia influence as well. And so ensuring that they can't do that in the future under any administration would be a priority, that they stay doing what they're supposed to do and hardening our systems and working with local officials to do that is a priority. And I'd look forward to working with you on legislation should you wish to rein them in.
The first step in that process is to expose the truth, to find out who these bad actors were, expose who they were, hold them accountable. I mean, that is crucial. We take that first step. So again, look forward to working with you on that. You know, the tragedy of the California fires, the more we learn, the more we understand that not only was it predictable, it was predicted, which means it was preventable. Again, you can't start the initiation of those fires, but you certainly prevent them from raging into the tragedy that they became, the dozens of people who've lost their lives, the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of property damage. It's not just California, though. Again, that was grotesque mismanagement.
The whole country
that could have been prevented. You can't prevent a hurricane.
Biden.
You can't prevent floods, but you certainly can try and start reducing the moral hazard that we've allowed to explode, quite honestly, by the federal government rushing in immediately, no questions asked, tell us how big a check you want. What can you do in your new role to try and start reducing over time the moral hazard that we have created in this country with federal disaster relief?
Well, Senator, emergencies and disasters are always locally led. They're led by the local communities and leaders, and that's because they're much more responsive and much better informed on how to bring relief and to get those emergency services there to meet the need. Then it's state supported and federally resourced, which means that when we come in, that we're supporting what the mission is, what those emergency operations and plans are that the local city and county and then also the state has implemented, and do what we can to fulfill the mission of our programs. One of the things that FEMA's not doing today that I think we should be doing is streamlining communications. We saw this in New Orleans. We saw it in other terrorist attacks in the country. And you just referenced it as well about the American people not getting the truth, senators not getting the truth and the transparency that we need, is that I believe FEMA can always put out a blueprint for what a response would be should something terrible happen. And when we look at the Secret Service, what happened in Butler, we saw that communication was an issue, that the Secret Service wasn't communicating and balls were getting dropped with local authorities, local law enforcement. And we can put forward a blueprint for how communication can happen and be streamlined between the federal government, the state, and the local entities so that should something happen, this is how we talk to each other to make sure that the public has the facts, they're not getting misinformation, which happened with the New Orleans terror attack just recently, but also up in Pennsylvania as well. That blueprint is what we do at the state level that FEMA has failed to do, to proactively educate the public on what everybody's roles are, what we do should something happen, whether it be a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or an emergency response is needed, that we can put out those blueprints ahead of time, educate people, train those local entities, which they currently do to a certain extent today, but not good enough to really know that not only can the resources be pre-deployed in many of these situations so that they're more readily accessible, but also how are we going to communicate and make sure everybody's on the same page so that we can be much more efficient. I wish that we would have had different leadership and a different governor in California, or we might have a different result there. But in the Department of Homeland Security, we can do all that we can to make sure that people that live in California know that they're going to get a response from the federal government that's appropriate. And we did all that we could to make sure that they had the information ahead of time so they could protect themselves when they do have a failure in leadership like we've seen.
Kristi Noem, so Trump's Homeland Security Secretary nominee, doing well in front of the Senate today. We'll see how quickly she can get confirmed, but good takes on what needs to happen at the border. And quite frankly, we are all California under Joe Biden and Democrat leadership. They have done what they've done to California, to all of us. We just don't see it engulfed in flames, visual flames. They're metaphorical flames. We see it happening all over the place, coming to an end in 3 short days, but it still is that type of leadership. Okay, there are tons of Gavin Newsoms, right? Mayorkas is Gavin Newsom. He's just less communicative, right? They're all of the same ilk. They're all cut from the same cloth. So now we're going to get some recourse on January 20th. Soon as Trump is sworn in, Kristi Noem right behind him. We're waiting for Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearings. We're going to be covering those. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do.